You're listening to Inside iOS Dev, a show about real-world iOS development, today with your host Andrew Rohn.
And Alex Bush.
Today we're going to talk about Try Swift 2017 in New York. We're going to talk about what we did there,
What we
learned, who we met. It was awesome. It's just to introduce, Try Swift is a conference started by Natasha the Robot. Natasha has done a really great job of creating this great community. I would say international community around Swift and iOS. So it's awesome. I think there's one in New York, there's one in New York, one in Tokyo, and one in Bangalore. So we went to the one in New York, and we learned a few things about a few things.
For me, there were a bunch of great talks. I unfortunately only was able to attend one day out of two. But for me, the kind of notable talks and things I learned were redux-ish. I guess that's the way I call it. The Matt Gallaghers, he gave a talk. Yeah, he gave a talk driving view state through data for fun and or debugging. Essentially, that's conceptually what he was talking about was a redux-ish type of storage where you would kind of have this global state UI state storage in your app, and it kind of drives all of your UI changes. Pretty interesting, because you would normally see that Redux is a technology that's used on front-end development, JavaScript development. You normally see it in used with React, but he showed us how it's done on iOS using custom implementation. But there are also libraries such as ReSwift that do that. And yeah, that was very interesting. I want to play with that now.
What is it, and why do I care? What am I going to do with it?
Basically, good old problem, massive view controller, right? We're still trying to find ways of solving that.
Yep.
And that's one of the approaches. Basically, instead of storing your state right here and there in your view controllers, you would have a standalone storage where the state of your UI lives, and the rest of the application effectively observes that storage, and every time it changes, the UI reflects it.
So there's a binding of the UI to some state and this global storage thing,
right? But it's what is it? Unidirectional, one directional. I forgot how they call it.
Unidirectional data flow.
Yeah, where essentially it only goes one way, right? Like your UI observes the store, and when it changes, it reflects it. And but UI doesn't directly change your store. The only way it can do that through dispatching actions, and that's a kind of decoupled standalone thing. And not only your UI can dispatch actions, but other parts of your application as well, such as like network requests and stuff. But in a nutshell, that's the idea. I've seen it only implemented in front-end development with React, so I wanna play with it on iOS.
Yeah, one cool thing that he was able to do since now he's keeping track of state, he was able to, like, it's this concept of like time traveling, basically. Right. He starts the application, he clicks on a button, he swipes, he goes to another view controller, and all along the way, all this view state is being saved, and then so like literally he would slide a slider, and then like you would see like it would basically undo replay all the changes he did, but you would like see it literally going back in time, and then you can replay it going forward. Right. So it's really interesting. What else did we learn?
And another one for me was Vapor and the state of, I guess, an overview of Vapor framework and the state of server-side Swift. I had my reservations about it, and I still do, quite frankly. But now I'm curious. Now it seems like, specifically with the Vapor framework, it's almost up to par feature-wise with Rails. and similar frameworks. And seems like it's good to go for backend development. I'm kind of looking forward to playing with it and maybe building some backend APIs for iOS apps or like mobile apps in general. Because I used to use Rails for that, because that was a Ruby was super close to Objective-C, right? But now we could use the same language for both, right?
So maybe we don't need that React Native after all.
Maybe. And also the promise with backend Swift is that I done a little bit of digging today. The promise with Swift on the backend is super fast. It actually beats Java in performance-wise and some benchmarks. So that is surprising.
Another thing to mention was you were able to actually talk with Tanner, right? The creator of Vapor,
I think he's
framework.
Yeah, I believe so. He's a contributor, creator.
Yeah, he contributed in some way to this. So this is one thing I want to touch on about attending this conference, Try Swift, and just conferences in general. You're able to network and talk with these people and have conversations and ask contributors or creators of technologies questions, right? So can you tell me like what that conversation was like, and just like what's the benefits of being able to do that?
For this specific conversation, obviously he's very knowledgeable about that framework, right? And I was curious how much, how many features that Rails has, Vapor has as well, right? Because that's the kind of like, I guess, a benchmark for me, how close you are to Rails, because that's a really good framework in my opinion for the backend. And yeah, and we just chatted about that and what's Vapor capable of today, and some internal implementation, right? For example, they struggle a little bit with threading, and there are issues with that, where as far as I understood, again, I need to dig a little bit more. As far as I understood, Grand Central Dispatch is not fully ported to the backend Swift or server-side Swift.
Right.
So the threading has to be actually done with threads.
Manually with threads.
Which is a challenge, right, with all of those issues. That's why Grand Central Dispatch is so amazing on iOS.
We're spoiled in a way to have it.
We're very spoiled, yeah. So, I was able to kind of, I guess, talk about that. And the overall benefit of, attending conferences and being able to actually ask those questions, right? After every talk, each person who was presenting had a Q&A hour, right? And yeah, a lot of people came up to them and asked their questions about like the code samples they showed or whatever other things they wanted to ask about.
Yeah, after every talk, they had a Q&A session, so you can go have a discussion with the speaker. So yeah, if you're stuck on a problem or you needed a point of clarification, that's perfect. They're there. You can talk with them. Yeah, that's what's nice about these conferences. That's one big benefit.
And another one, just since you mentioned, kind of another experience which is related to that. One of the breaks, like one of the talks, I kind of skipped and just worked on my stuff. So I was hanging out in the hallway, right, where there were tables there and seats, right. So I met someone who actually works at Apple, and he writes compilers. So I was able to, he showed me the compiler and new language he was working on. And I was able to ask a bunch of questions about Xcode project variables and their purpose and where I can read about it, because there's no documentation, right? It's a kind of like a black magic to me. And apparently I didn't know Xcode helps you with that. There are little snippets and descriptions. Yeah, it's good to know now.
Yeah, and you might not have found that out otherwise.
Yeah, and I would not have met that person otherwise.
These serendipitous moments, you don't know who you're going to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, I wanted to play a interview actually I did with one of the speakers, Neem, Serra. She did a talk titled Map and FlatMap Magic. So we're going to go ahead and play that interview right now. Cool. I'll just
that's fine.
Here. Yeah, I just wanted to like talk about because it sounds like you had an interesting background. Like, can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I have my master's in evolutionary biology, and I was going for a PhD, and my best friend was like, "You should quit. You're miserable at grad school. I'll teach you how to program in a weekend." And so I was living in Michigan, and I went and visited St. Louis for a weekend, and he taught me how to program, and I decided to quit grad school and move all my belongings, become his roommate, and
Wow.
yeah,
Cool.
And then within a month I got a couple of programming jobs offers, so
Wow.
yeah,
That's
it
awesome.
was exciting.
How did
Exciting.
you learn? Like, what did you?
So I took 2 programming classes in my undergrad, and then when I
Okay.
was in undergrad, I worked in a half computer science, half biology lab. So I
Okay.
was just around a lot of computer scientists.
Oh, so you had some like
Yeah, so I just
background.
like heard a lot about the things and like could pseudocode and whatever. I
Right,
just
right.
didn't know the syntax for it. Yeah.
Nice.
And then my boss at the time taught this software carpentry workshop, which is like a 2-day workshop in programming. And I was going to take the workshop, and he told me to be a TA for the workshop, so I had to learn everything before.
Oh, I feel like that's the best way to learn is to teach.
No, I had to learn everything like 5 seconds before somebody would ask a question.
Wow.
And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. I like programming. But then I just didn't do anything until he was like, hey, you should quit and be a programmer. And I was like, okay, cool.
Cool.
And the first project I was on was an iOS project, so that's why I love it.
So how did you get that first project? Like, did you kind of like networking, or did you apply? Or?
I applied to a whole bunch of places, and
Okay.
I wanted to stay in St. Louis, so I applied to like all sorts of jobs, like being a professor in biology and like, being a programmer and whatever.
Oh, wow.
And I got really lucky. That's completely honest, super lucky.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know what else to say about it other than I feel incredibly lucky that people liked me enough in interviews that they were like, yeah, sure, you can be an entry-level dev.
Awesome.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. So how long have you been in iOS dev now?
Yeah. 4.5 years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Wow. And so your talk was on, I guess, functional programming and specifically using map and FlatMap. Like, what drew you to that, and like, why this topic?
A friend of mine actually did a similar talk at work, and
Okay.
so I was like, I don't know what to do a talk on.
Okay.
And he was like, you could do a talk on this, but make it slightly more understandable because mine was too confusing. And so we kind of worked together, and that's why I did it in cupcakes, because he did it in a playground, and it was just like, it was too high level.
Can you describe the cupcake, like how it worked, like the talk, like how you use the cupcakes to describe things?
So I do another talk on unconscious bias, and it has a lot of cupcakes in it, so I figured everyone loves cupcakes, and so I could show people using like a tangible example of how, it's easier to see actual objects moving through mapping and flat mapping and seeing what's happening to them. And it's easier for me to wrap my mind around, so I figured I could make it cupcake themed. Yeah, make it slightly less scary.
It really helped me, especially with the FlatMap example, because I feel like FlatMap can be somewhat complicated, so I feel like the visualization helped.
Definitely.
One key takeaway for me was the FlatMap, where you said like takes away one level of layer, I guess.
Yep.
So like if you have a 2D array and then you flat map, it'll make it one just regular array.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm wondering, let's say like if you had for some odd reason had a 7-dimensional array, if you did a flat map, would it create a 6-dimensional array?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you just like keep flat mapping?
You can keep flat mapping for days. I did that example on in the plane. I was like, I wonder if this is really true. Oh, yes it is.
Oh, it works.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what are like some of the benefits of functional programming?
So I wanted to learn, I learned more about mapping and flat mapping because it kind of helps your mind get more used to it, how things kind of work for more of like reactive Swift and like RX Swift kind of downstream.
Right.
Because I feel like that kind of flips your thinking on how you approach problems.
Right.
And so this is like a good first step to starting to understand to go more in that direction. My project at work doesn't use RX Swift right now, but other projects do. And so I wanted to start to get more in that mindset.
Nice. Yeah, actually, that reminded me, my friend, he was like, ask her about RX Swift, and I was like, I have never used it. He's like, you don't like have to know about it, just ask her. So like, what's your...
So I don't know about it, but I know that the really smart developers where I work, who I want to become like, they are super into it.
Okay.
And they had a project with just 4 developers. They took 2 new developers on, so like 2 people who knew RX and 2 people who didn't, and they said that the learning curve is really hard, and so it takes people a really long time to start getting into that mindset and thinking that way.
During the talk you gave, you said like you had like a ranking of like, I think these people are like amazing programmers.
Yeah.
Like, can you say the ranking? I forgot. I thought
said
it was really
kernel
funny.
developers are at the top.
Kernel
and then-
developers are like the peak.
I know, because that's like hardcore.
Yeah.
And then functional programmers, and then like mobile developers, and then web developers, and then like
those poor.
And at some point in time, I did web development, but
Okay.
they were underneath mobile development. Let's be
That's
real.
right.
Yeah.
Our mobile devs were good.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. I enjoyed your talk.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, that was the interview with Neem, Serra. Thank you very much, Neem, for your time. That was a really nice conversation we had. So what else was there? There was a talk by Paul Fenwick titled Machine Ethics and Emerging Technologies. Now, this was a talk that I was not expecting at all. I don't think very many people were... this is a developer conference. This is technology related, but it's not specifically about Swift or iOS development, but this was a really good talk. Basically, in this talk, Paul talked about things like basically the intersection of humanity and technology and some of its perhaps deleterious side effects. Things like technological unemployment. So what happens when people are put out of jobs because their job has been automated away by technology? Things like autonomous drones. Well, right now we have drones that can, fly around and find targets, but ultimately, before the missile is fired, a human has to kind of pull the trigger in a way by actually firing the missile. The drone cannot do it itself. The technology exists, though, for the drone to make the decision itself to fire that missile without human intervention, without a human to help make that decision. What are the ethical kind of concerns with that? That's kind of a scary world to live in, right? It was really interesting. I think a lot of people really enjoyed that talk. But yeah, that was it. There was a lot more actually to the conference. We covered a fraction of the amount of talks and the amount of content that was covered and kind of what happened. But these were kind of some of the highlights.
Speaking of the content, it's actually all going to be published on Realm.io. So you guys can go there and watch it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, guys, if you can attend those conferences, ask your employers if they will pay for that. Maybe if not, it's a great investment.
Ask your employers to cover it because it's an investment. Because they want to train you because they want good people to be out there. They're working for them, right? So ask your employer to invest in things like this. It's an investment. It really is. You go there and you learn things and you meet people and you have these serendipitous conversations where you learn things that you didn't even know you wanted to learn.
Right.
So try Swift. We recommend it.
Thanks to Natasha for putting it together.
Yep, and thanks for all the speakers as well. It was really nice.
All right, guys, that's it for today. Please let us know what you think. Tweet at us at InsideIOSDev on Twitter or email us at hello@insideiosdev.com. We would love to chat, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye.